Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, and an eminent biotechnologist in his own right, Dr. Rajesh Gokhale, Dr. Alka Sharma, Dr. Jitendra Kumar from BIREC, Dr. Arunachalam, Dr. Jagannathan, members of the fraternity, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I have to congratulate you all and also myself for being a part of this event. We are launching, as you said, this first of its kind MRI scanner made in India. When Rajesh was saying make in India, I said it's make in India for made for the world. Very soon, like vaccine, I think we'll also be seeing it being provided to some of the neighboring countries as we did with the case of vaccine. So congratulations. For those of us who belong to this generation of scientific workers, including Jagannathan, I think it's been a fascinating journey. We have seen the evolution of India's both therapeutics as well as diagnostic evolution over the last more than half a century. At least when I was an undergraduate student, the maximum was an X-ray. By the time I became a resident, it was ultrasound. By the time I was a postgraduate, CT scan had just come in. And MRI happened after I completed my post-graduation and became a senior resident. So it's been a very fascinating journey. And there were times, he would recall because he was more into the technology part of it, but at least in the surgical side, we had a very famous surgery called exploratory laparotomy. And any day, even at AIMS, if you saw the list of the surgery cases put up, you would have at least 4 or 5 of them. And that meant that they would open up the abdomen just to see what was there inside. Today, much more than what they saw with the naked eyes available through MRI. So such a huge transformation. And absolutely a very aggressive, invasive surgery was undertaken. The entire incision from across the vertically across the abdomen, and then they would try to look, because even if you had some lymph node, they would not know if it was hardened, whether it's hardened because of tuberculosis or malignancy. Then, of course, ultrasound started giving some cues, and now, of course, MRI. So it's been a fantastic evolution for medical practitioners and also scholars of medicine. And similarly also, as we started getting all these modern tools of diagnosis, the disease spectrum also went on changing. So earlier on, we were dealing mostly with communicable diseases like cholera and gastroenteritis, all sorts of infections, even tuberculosis, typhoid. And by the time, and we didn't have all these tools, so it was easy to, diagnose with the pulse. And the generation before me, in fact, was more into the non-pharmacological and non-diagnostic means of management. I know how many of you would know that for a very long time, the management of typhoid was starvation for 1 month. You would give only liquid diet because the Peyer's patches would get fragile, and perforation was one of the main complications in enteric fever. So till we got chlorophenicol, which was the first time that was used, and there was no such tools available of diagnosis. So it was all by pulse, and also by matching the pulse rate with the temperature, because there was variation, the mismatch between the pulse rate and the temperature rise, all those clinical things. So having evolved from that clinical to this era, now I think, I was asking one of my friends, good friend Naresh, the other day, I said, if one of your patient turns up, can you recognize him? He said, don't joke with me. I said, because you watch him on the screen and your residents do the surgery. So it's been now such a journey that you don't even need an individual contact with a doctor So much is the tool available, and I think what is rest is going to be taken up by artificial intelligence. And someday you might even organize a ceremony like this without any one of us. Some artificial minister and artificial secretary sitting there, because the day is not far. You can actually recreate them, because I have a very fascinating group of young boys into a startup telemedicine. They have actually created fascinating AI doctors. And that lady talks to you, you feel like continuing the conversation. I mean, she's so convincing and so sympathetic, at the same time so knowledgeable, so inquisitive. So what I'm trying to say, the entire is such an explosion of knowledge happening. But, and at the same time, the lifespan is increasing, so with the increase of lifespan, all these gadgets will come handy. Virtually every patient who is approaching the age of 60 is being advised MRI for a prostate. So that is a pet. So you have assured market, because earlier on people didn't live that long. Now the surgeon knows if I refer to Dr. Jagannathan, I'll also be party to some returns, which I don't want. So whether required or not, earlier on they just used to do the per rectum test, and with the consistency of the prostate they would make out if it is harder. Now they would not take. No, we can't take chance. You go to Jagannathan. So there's a assured market now actually for MRI. So therefore I think with the celebration of this new generation or the next generation MRI scanner, we are actually not only celebrating this new gadget, but also celebrating the medical world's journey, and in fact India's journey from where we were and where we've reached. And also I would say, when you talk of Atmanirbharta, I think it's also celebration of the journey from colonial dependence to Atmanirbharta. Not many years ago, when the cardiac surgery had just started in this country, it was a fashion, in the elite circle to say, okay, I got my cardiac surgery done at Houston. So Houston became famous in India for no other reason, just because many of those who could afford went there for a heart surgery. Nobody else knew what Houston was. Some of the VVIPs went there. Now it's the other way around. You just walk into any heart hospital, 3 out of 2 or 2 out of 3 will come back with a stunt, whether they require or not. So what I'm trying to say is that this actually has revolutionized the entire way. I sometimes wonder whether the new generation would actually be able to visualize what a great transition it has been. And of course, a great celebration of what Prime Minister Modi has always been reiterating, Atmanirbhar Bharat. And this is, in fact, we are in a way celebrating Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, as far as the voxel grid MRI scanner is concerned, as was being mentioned by Dr. Arunachalam and others also, it's lightweight, so you could now carry it. This is going to be a great facility. It's cost effective in the sense that it's less expensive, portable, indigenous, as was said. He said make in India. I would also say make in India and make for the world. And of course enhanced imagery, which Dr. Jagannathan would bear me out, because every next generation has that. So this is also an addition to the increasing armamentarium of the preventive health care that we are into now. Because when I was a few moments talking about every patient approaching 60 being referred to Dr. Jagannathan for a prostate scan, maybe there is the other way, part of the story also, because they could also help preventing many of the impending catastrophes, particularly in the diagnosis of or the early detection of several of the malignancies, which are now becoming more and more curable, because we have a whole list of malignancies. If you go to a class of oncology, they would categorize it: curable, less curable, or maybe worse prognosis. So you have now, but all that, again, the outcome and the prognosis would depend on how well, with what amount of specificity and sensitivity are you able to detect, and at what early stage. So therein these gadgets come in. While congratulating the voxel grid, I think the the drum has to be beaten for Dr. Rajesh Gokhale and his team also, because it was they who have facilitated this. The BIREC, I believe the total cost was about 17 crore, Dr. Arunachalam, out of which 12 crore is Dr. Rajesh Gokhale's. And that is not often talked about, so I have to talk about that. So I leave you to go home and decide whether the machine belongs to whom. So, because out of 17 crore, but nevertheless, that is not to undermine the participation, because this is a very healthy public-private participation. Why I am saying so is that having learnt in a bitter way from the vaccine story, ultimately the show gets stolen by the marketeer, and the script writer remains at the back of it. So, not that is something, I mean, that's a part of the human nature. When you go to watch the movie, you appreciate the hero and the heroine. You don't know who is the director and who wrote the script or who made the heroine look good. So that is precisely what is happening. Now, when this is to be brought to the market, of course, that is equally important to publicize it so that it reaches the stakeholders. So it's not their fault. It is their responsibility to generate good markets so that people who require it can benefit. So for obvious reasons, they have to blow the trumpet, they have to play jiggles, they have to put up advertisements. But the team which conducts trial believes that their task is over. But then some kind of remorse comes in when they feel that everybody else is being celebrated besides them. So I think I was suggesting, Rajesh, been suggesting to him ever since he joined, that you should start blowing your trumpet right from the beginning. Because in the world that we live in, nobody is going to pat your back. You have to pat your own back. And you have to keep telling them what you are doing. So I have to equally, if I don't pat his back, who would? So I must compliment BIREC and the Department of Biotechnology. So I'm glad that you are also patting. So I'm glad that the Department of Biotechnology and the BIREC had the vision and the sense and the wisdom to participate, to finance and facilitate this invention, because it's not only a service to the ailing mankind, it's also a service to the cause of Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat that the Honorable Prime Minister has been talking about. And I'm sure in the times to come, because the current demand, I was saying, is just about 350 is per year, but you are going to have much more increase in the years to come. Maybe by 2030, I was told there is going to be 350 machines per year. That's your projection. So I hope the next generation also is funded by BIREC, and the I'm saying I'm like a smart partner in this PP arrangement. I'm saying that the demand is going to increase, and there is also going to be a demand to have next generation. And I'm sure this partnership will continue for the next generation also. And yes, at the same time, it's also a vindication of the PPP model, which has been very close to my heart and I always been talking about. I know why in government circles sometimes we feel shy of engaging with a private partner, which I, for once, has been advocating that unless we get out of that kind of mindset, we would not be able to move on from where we are. So in order to have a growth which is wholesome and which is to the best of our potentials, we need to have a synergy of all these stakeholders, whether it's academia, it's a researcher, whether it's the startup and industry right from the beginning, and make industry your partner and stakeholder right from the beginning. And you are going to have an enhanced responsibility also with the National Research Foundation being in the pipeline. The cabinet has already passed it. Very soon it will be brought in the parliament also. And of course, a few months will go in just setting up the structure, but it will become functional after a year or so. I mean, take time also. And both the Department of Biotechnology and the Department of Science and Technology are going to have a huge responsibility in putting it on the right track and also ensuring the kind of outcomes and the vision with which it has been envisaged, because a lot of passion And hard work has been put in or invested in the making of that draft, which took 2-3 years. There's so many times it was revised. Even yesterday, somebody told me, how are you going to get 35,000 crore from the industry? So I sat down along with the, I said, let's work out. He said, no, that will happen. No, because it's occurred to my mind because like a Khurafati researcher, if something happens to your mind, then you don't get sleep. So we worked out. I said, CSR, 10%, even if it is spared, because the total CSR of all the companies put together is about 30,000 crore. If it is put 10,000, you get about 7,000 or so per year, because this is 5 years calculation. And if you do engage in the manner in which you have engaged with voxel grid, you put in 100 crore, they put in 100 crore, I think your 7 crore per year can be made up. So it's not going to be difficult to raise that kind of resource if we have little more of open-mindedness to engage with the right kind of industry, and the industry is also there, and we can also give some liberty to industry to do the kind of mapping. Now, for example, if their concern is there, Jagannathan will tell you, look here, now the sale of this gadget is gone down. You'll say this one day, not today. After a year, you're going to come back and say, because I've been part of the same profession. And when I ask you, or Rajesh asks you why, you'll say, no, China has come out with the next generation. So then we'll have to make up. So you are there, I am there, the partners are there. So we again make another movie as we do the remake of the old movie. So there is tremendous scope. Only thing that we have to have that vision. We have to be actually living into future. That is now the challenge, is that we think about tomorrow with our yesterday's mindset. And the time is moving so fast that what we think about happening next morning is already happened midnight. It happened today also. The Chandrayaan had to leave the last orbit. It left exactly when I felt sleep, at 12:30. So I was keeping a track, because that was a crucial journey. After 6 circles, it moved out from the outer circle of the Earth and then went into the outer circle of the Moon, where it will enter about 4 or 5 days later. So we thought it would happen till morning, but it happened even before you had woken up. So things are moving in a very rapid fashion. But as Prime Minister keeps talking about the Amrit Kal, I think this is one of the best times happening. Best time happening for this model of PPP experiment. Best time happening for the scientific fraternity, because the whole world, and luckily much more so India under the present leadership, has awoken to the fact that the entire growth universally is going to be technology driven, is going to be startup driven. There's no other choice. And bioeconomy, which had been so far neglected, or maybe it didn't catch our priority in the earlier years, is going to be one of the main players in building up the future economy of India. We just had $10 billion US economy, now it's 80 billion within 5-6 years. And it's projected to be 100 billion by 2025. And biomanufacturing, which Rajesh has been very passionately talking about. And so I told him you should start holding workshops first to make people understand what's it. It's biology or manufacturing. It's engineering or... So people don't understand what is manufacturing, what is bio got to do with it, because their manufacturing concept has got, conditioned by some other kind of images. But this is going to be the reality tomorrow. And with bioeconomy being the key to the India's future economy, and startups, particularly sustainable startups, are the ones which are going to determine India's future growth. And with the vaccine having, placed us in the front line as a biotechnology capability which can take a lead, I think the world now has accepted our biotechnology capability. So the recognition has already come. Here also now the responsibility would be to sustain that reputation and that recognition. And therefore, I think we are now moving in that direction. Congratulations, Dr. Jagannathan, once again. The AIIMS loss is voxel grid's gain. But that's precisely happening with the exit of some of the senior doctors from AIIMS. But a doctor is always a doctor wherever he is. So that is the advantage. Wherever you are, you will be serving the cause, and I'm sure we will move on to the next generation also with the same kind of arrangement. Congratulations once again.
Thanks a lot, sir, for your inspirational words. And we are very fortunate to have your constant support.